Well, hey there, it's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol. That's wavetables.lol. Home of KRC Mathwaves, my gigantic collection of wavetables, single-cycle waveforms, and even some samples for all sorts of modern synthesizers, including our friend Pigment 6. Now, in Pigment 6, I'm not actually playing a wavetable right now, and I wasn't a Pigments user until very recently. I wanted to, right at the start of today's programming, point out that Pigment 6 it has an introductory price of $99 right now over at Arturia.com. Even though I support Pigments as one of the many wavetable formats that support it, supports the same format as Serum and Vital wave format wavetables. I'd only done a little bit of work with Pigments and just in demo mode, and I did do a video about how to import wavetables to Pigments, but I wasn't really wowed by it in previous versions. But I was watching a video by Dash Glitch, who was demoing what we're hearing right now is this new modal synthesis engine that's in Pigment 6, which is a physical modeling engine that sounds great. And if you've seen my previous videos about Dawson Myth, I talked about physical modeling in Dawson Myth, which I thought was one of the best parts of Dawson Myth 1.0. I didn't like a lot of the other parts of Dawson Myth. But the physical modeling stuff sold me on that. And so basically Pigments, even though it's not my favorite wavetable synth, has a lot to offer with the modal engine, with a sampling engine that I'm itchy, sorry. A sampling engine that actually has granular synthesis built into it, and then like a really well specified wavetable oscillator. It sounds great. It's got good filters. And good effects, and it's got a bunch of new filters. This is not a review of Pigment 6, by the way. I have a bunch of other stuff to talk about. But right out of the gate, I wanted to say I pulled the trigger on Pigments because at $99, Pigment 6 is like an awesome tool to add to your utility belt. I say go and get it if you can afford it. All right, pretty cool. I'm going to get Korg Modwave up because maybe we'll look at this later. What I wanted to talk about today is a couple of new things. There's a new set of wavetables in KRC Mathwaves. Let's see. I'm going to have to turn on MIDI here, aren't I? I know I'm going to. There we go. Yes. Yeah, there's a bunch of new... Whoa. Some new wavetables in KRC Mathwaves called Hybrid Bezier, or Hybrid Bezier, we should say more correctly, or Hybez. No, I don't want this update. I do not want this update right now, Windows. Thank you. Kind of interesting new wavetables that were, as I often do, made in cooperation with one of my AI friends. These don't use my variational autoencoder, but the concept behind these wavetables was cooked up by one of the new OpenAI models, the O3 mini model, which is much more capable in terms of coding and certain kinds of creativity. We'll talk about that a little bit. And also, I wanted to talk about unusual modulations. We actually heard an unusual modulation in that physical modeling patch that we were hearing in the intro with Pigments. I want to talk about that. I'll probably do a whole series, actually, of videos about unusual modulations. And the unusual modulation that we're going to look at today, I would call pitch slope modulation. And that's what we're going to talk about. Hey, but first, what's been going on? Well, everything's crazy, right? Everything's crazy. You live in the U.S., everything's crazy. You know, my last video was done before the inauguration of our illustrious returning president. And like we're slipping into authoritarianism and fascism, so take a drink. Anyway, I don't support that sort of thing, and I just wanted to go on record as not being supportive of that sort of thing. But don't blame me. I voted, I'm a one-issue voter. I vote based on your shoes. Not really. But, I voted for the lady that wears Chuck Taylors because that's what I wear. Now, what else has been going on? Well, David Lynch passed away. And if you're a viewer of my channel, you might have noticed at times that there's a strong Lynchian, what am I saying? There's a strong Lynchian influence in some of the creative things that I do. Like I sometimes do these like kind of weird, like AI video intros. And that sense of surreality that I have is definitely coming from David Lynch and his films and his artwork and some of his thinking. For example, in the intro to my Korg multi-poly review, the first in my series of 3 videos about Korg multi-poly, I did a little intro that was one of the themes from Twin Peaks, with apologies to Angelo Badalamenti, who did a much better job of playing that than I did. And I probably played it in the wrong key, but you knew it was the Twin Peaks theme, or really probably Laurel Palmer's theme. And then, this also showed up recently in the intro that I did to the Korg multi-poly video about the wave shaper oscillator. There's this electricity sound that I showed that uses the wave shaper, and then in the weird video that I did with the little demo track that's all the wave shaping oscillator. There's this electric sound at the beginning, and Lynch was fascinated by electricity, kind of viewed it as being magical, and kind of thought of it as having a sound even when it's not making a sound. But you find in his sound design in his films that there's often like electrical arcing sounds, and then also things like 60 cycle hum. Very fascinating, and I was very sad to hear that he passed, and I didn't really realize before his passing that I probably think about David Lynch and his films and things that he either said or thought about a couple times a month. Which is kind of interesting that someone could be so influential. Also, since I had been looking kind of for people's appreciation of David Lynch, I ran across a new to me channel that's the channel of Bill Wolfer, who's really interesting. I want to point you in the direction of his channel. Wait, I got to get my browser up. Go check him out on YouTube. He's at Bill Wolfer 4020. And Bill Wolfer is like me. He's a little older than me, but he's definitely from the 80s. And he did a lot of record production, and he was also a session player in the 80s, and doing synthesizers and synth programming. And even if you've never heard of Bill, who's a fascinating guy and also produces what I would call talky synthesizer content, Bill, you have heard his work. You've heard him play before because he plays the CS80 part on Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. And there's 2 actually fascinating videos about his work on Billie Jean. One with Anthony Marinelli, who's another 80s cat who has resurfaced and has been doing some great videos about all sorts of, about his history working with people like Michael Jackson. And then Wolfer is a close friend of Stevie Wonder's and has a long history of working with Stevie Wonder. So there's some delightful stuff in his channel. Go check him out. And he has my introduction to him was his video about remembering David Lynch. We're going to stop that so that we don't get audio clogging things up. But this is a great video. There's links in the description. There's always links in the description to everything I talk about. Go check out Bill Wolfer. I'm sad that I'm sad that Lynch passed away, or maybe he just phased into the White Lodge or the Black Lodge or something like that. But he's left our reality, and I'm glad that I could discover Bill Wolfer's channel, based on the fact that he passed away. So there we go. I wanted to get that out there. Tip of the hat to Dash Glitch for turning me on to Pigment 6. Tip of the hat to David Lynch for everything. Tip of the hat to Bill Wolfer for his really exceptional content. It's quite fascinating. All right, I'm going to take a short break and then we'll continue. Let's talk about some of these new wavetables and some of the new AI experiments that I've been doing. And then I hope that we'll have time to get to some unusual modulations, the pitch slope modulation. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about these new wavetables that are in the full version of KRC Mathwaves. There's about 1,050 of them. The category is called Hybez for hybrid Bezier. If you import these into, hey, go away. If you import these into Korg modwave native, Korg multipoly, or Korg multipoly native, you will find them in a new category called KRC Hybez. It's right here. And there, like I say, there's about 1,050 of these in various types. So these are kind of interesting. Let's maybe explore a different example. What's this patch? So these were developed, like I say, during conversations with my new pal, ChatGPT 03 Mini High, which is it's really good at code-based stuff. It does just about as well, if not better, than the other models at getting Python code right. It didn't seem to make any errors when I was experimenting with it Friday night for one of the first times. And you know what I did in that session with it is I uploaded the Python code that I used to make my wavetables called the split wavetables. There's a whole video about those. But I just kind of let it have, after doing that, you know, giving it a sample code, which like teaches it a whole bunch of things that it may not know right out of the box, right? It's like sending it the code for like wavetable generation like I do. Yeah, you know, helps it understand, oh, okay, wavetables, as we're talking about here, are like 32-bit wave files. They might have up to 64 frames. Here's what he means when he talks about time domain versus, you know, different spectral domain techniques, et cetera, et cetera. And then just to kind of test its creativity, I was like, okay, well, now that you've seen that, why don't you give me a few ideas for different synthesis techniques we might use besides the one that you just saw, you know, and write the code for it. And so we went back and forth a little bit about a couple of ideas until at one point it came up with an idea that I hadn't seen chat come up with yet, which is to do a multi-segmented Bezier time domain waveform. So its idea was like, well, we could take the 2048 samples that we've got available. We could pick some different, like, you know, kind of like split points, and then we could draw Bezier curves, not a complex Bezier curve, but just a Bezier curve segment between them. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea. And then it had also been talking about some spectral ideas. And one, I didn't quite understand actually what it was getting at, but it did write the code for it. It was doing some kind of like an inverse FFT on some sort of Gaussian spectral envelope. And I was like, well, okay, let's combine those two techniques. And it's like, oh, okay, great. So we'll do these multi-segment Bezier curves, and over the course of the wavetable, we'll crossfade it with the spectrally generated waveform that we came up with. And I was like, okay, that sounds really cool. Let's do that. And it actually, a couple like small like tweaks aside, it came up with these waveforms that actually sound really interesting. And in some cases are very gentle. I'm going to go in here to Oscillator 2, which has one of these hybrid waveforms in it. Let's see here. You can hear that. Let's change the way its envelope goes. Let's go down here. If we go all the way to the bottom, like this is kind of a triangle sort of wave, right? It's sort of a triangular waveform, but it's got, you know, this kind of curved slope to it. And there's probably a few waveforms like this in the full KRC Mathwaves collection, but I found it interesting that there's this kind of great diversity. Let's move our cutoff all the way up so we can really hear this waveform. It's basically going to sound a little bit like a filtered sawtooth. But then this technique with the multi-point Bezier curves then can create some very complex waveforms as well, like this one. You know, this would be a good replacement, right, for a square wave or a sawtooth wave. So it's just this nice kind of rich, harmonically rich waveform that, you know, with the filter on, can create some interesting timbres. So that's pretty cool. There are several different types of these in here, and I will confess, I mean, it's not, Chad is not magic at this sort of thing, and it also doesn't, it doesn't really understand the best parameters for when you're doing synthesis like this. So its original proposal kind of had a smaller number of split points for the Bezier curves, and then there really is, it's the Gaussian. The Gaussian spectral waveform that it's doing, it's not like there are errors in it, but it's so narrow that it doesn't really affect the timbre of the other waveforms so much. Also, the original wavetables it came up with, since the Bezier waveform is actually randomized on every frame. And by the way, these wavetables have 4 frames apiece, so you can dial down crossfade width and just like zero in on the specific waveforms. Let's turn our filter back up. So there's only 4 frames in these, but they morph very nicely, right? Anyway, what was I saying? So the timbral properties of these wavetables were kind of all over the place because the Bezier curve was being, you know, sort of randomized at each point. And so an improvement that I made there is like, you know, this would be better if we use the MEL spectrogram to sort these so that there's a natural progression from high harmonic waveforms up here, right, at the top of the wavetable, down to less harmonically rich ones. But this created a bunch of really pleasing wavetables, and I applauded my friend's creativity in coming up with this multi-point Bezier curve wavetable, which is distinctly different from my own take on the Bezier curve wavetables. And there's a whole bunch of those, and there's a whole nother video about those. It was a very different idea. It's like, let's just put these curves between these points. It didn't like morph the control points or like morph the angle of the handles or anything. It was just like, I'm just going to make these cool kind of angular waveforms. So it's kind of neat. There's a lot of diversity in here. You know, here's another one that ends on this kind of triangular waveform, but has very different timbres going up in here. And so again, these are all going to be kind of buzzy. Some of them are going to be a little bit square wavy. You'll sometimes see things where there's flat parts. And that's kind of a neat transition right there. And there's several sorts of these. I don't really need to belabor these much. I think they're super interesting. Again, there's about 1,000 of them. There are several different variations. Let's just filter these, shall we? On the Hybez collection. So we'll just talk about the different types real quick. They all say F4, and then that means they have 4 frames. M is for mode. So I did a set of these like without that transition between the Bezier curve and the Gaussian spectral envelope thing. So M Bezier just means that it's using the Bezier multi-point curve. And so these are a little purer. Let's put a little animation back in there, shall we? Let's see, let's change the way that envelope goes, shall we? So this is OS2 envelope modulating position. You know, that one's a little bit nasally, maybe. If we take our filter up a little bit. I like waveforms like this one down at the bottom. Pretty interesting. Nice and kind of nasal. It's like, you know, it's as if we'd sort of bandpass filtered a saw in a way. They can sound real good. And again, this is a very simple patch, right? I've taken oscillator 1 all the way down, but we can put it back in. See, combined, these can be really great. Very synthy waveforms. These also sound great in multipoly. I'm not demoing Korg multipoly today. I will probably not. Dude, that's nice. Let's save that. We'll call that hybrid. I don't know what number I'm up to in Hybrid Explorer. We'll call it Hybrid Explorer 12, just in case. Okay. I'm not going to demo multipoly again or like do a video about multipoly probably until multipoly native comes out. That was another exciting thing in the time I've been away from you, friend. The Korg announced both a module version and the VST native version of Korg multipoly. And I'm not at liberty to say whether I've heard that software or not, but I'm sure it's going to be great when it comes out, possibly at the end of February, maybe early March. It's going to be something to look forward to for sure. Okay, wait, let's talk about just another couple of these types here, just so that you know what's in this collection. Again, this is part of KRC Mathwaves. It's $29 at www.wavetables.lol. If you use coupon code Sandra, you can save $9 off of that and get literally more than 160,000 wavetables, all sorts of different formats, from the Korg wavetable synthesizers to Serum and Vital and Phase Plant. We support Pigments. You get Eurorack versions that are like 16-bit wave edit format that you can load into lots of different hardware modules, or like more vintage wavetable synthesizers. And then also .wt format that's used in Surge and in Bitwig's. What is it called? Well, I forget what its wavetable synth is called, but it's the wavetable synth that's built in. Is it Polymer? Yeah, Polymer. WT for Surge and Polymer. And maybe another format I'm forgetting. Probably not. There's also some samples in there, my Varieties of Noise sample collection, and it's growing all the time. Okay, so anyway, so we've got the mode Bezier, and then we've got the mode hybrid. So there's mode mhybrid. So these are basically O3 Mini's original idea. So this is a multi-point Bezier curve that's spectrally morphed at various different points into this weird Gaussian spectral waveform. And they're not wildly different from the ones we were just looking at. Let's do this again. They're a little more pointy. They kind of have a little ridge in them sometimes, and that's the effect of that Gaussian. These are maybe a little bit brighter than just the Bezier ones. Let's like maybe add this with another one in oscillator 1. Let's scroll down here. Hey, give me the, come on. Let's see, Hybez. Let's go down here to where they're the mhybrids. So grab one at random. So now we've got a 2 oscillator patch. We could put more filter on that, bring up our resonance. I think those are really cool. So there you go. So that is the... So those are the mhybrids. And then I was like, okay, so since that spectral Gaussian waveform wasn't really particularly interesting to like morph these with, I said, okay, let's just take let's do the polygonal number waveforms. And so there's two versions that use the same idea, where you've got this multi-point Bezier curve envelope, but then we're blending it with a polygonal type of waveform. And so there's two versions of these. Hybrid 2 uses like a single polygonal waveform, like a certain number of sides, a certain number of harmonics, and it blends these two waveforms to give it these kind of interesting hybrid textures. We'll play one in a minute. And then there's Hybrid 3, where instead of just a single polygonal waveform as the thing we're blending with, at each frame in the wavetable, we select a random number of polygonal sides and also a random number of max harmonics. And so those kind of have some interesting textural differences in them. So let's pull up, do I have one with, let's see, that has the hybrids in it? That's not a good one. Let's go back here, just a sec. We'll play through some of those in a second. Let's go get a Hybrid 2, shall we? So here's in Wavetable 1. Sorry, Wavetable 1. It's Oscillator 1, isn't it? Okay, KRC Hybez. Let's go get a Hybrid 2 from the Hybez collection. I could just type in here to say Hybrid 2, couldn't I? But I'm too lazy. All right, so here's one of these Hybrid 2 wavetables. Let's modulate position. We need to slow that down, don't we? Oscillator 1, slow down that position. Sweet. Now, if you're a KRC Mathwaves user or a fan of my videos, you've probably seen wavetables that are a lot like this that we arrived at in very different ways. This particular wavetable looks a lot like some of the output from my variational autoencoder wavetables. And so it's kind of interesting how that wave model predicts wavetables like this, even though like it's not trained on these specifically. So there's a lot of different ways to arrive at different wavetable types. So again, these Hybrid 2s, they have a single polygonal waveform that we're crossfading to. And I think these are kind of interesting because it's a, instead of just like the pure tone of the polygonal waveform, it's mixed with these kind of more angular sawtoothy things. And so, at some positions, like the one we're looking at here, like they're buzzy, but they're not really strongly bell-like. And you're going to find lots of different. But this is interesting, right? Because it sounds like there's like a chime, but then it's layered on a kind of a sawtooth sort of sound. And then down here, this looks like it's very close to being a true polygonal series waveform. Cool. And of course, we could morph these the other direction, right? We could go from the bell-like tone to the buzzy tone. That was completely without filter. Let's put our filter back in. Okay, so those are like the Hybrid 2s. And then the Hybrid 3 can have different polygonal waveforms at each frame. So let's like scroll down to Hybrid 3. There we go, there's a Hybrid 3. And I like these kind of wavetables where you kind of go through different areas that have different sorts of shimmery timbres, right? And then sometimes you won't find as much of that as at all. Like this one doesn't seem to have a very strong bell-like timbre, but let's listen. It has like a little chink at the beginning. Or we could put that at the end, right? By modulating the other way. Anyway, if you're a KRC Mathwaves user, go grab these. They're the Hybez collection. Again, you'll find it at the bottom of every single dingle section in that very long product page. If you're not a user and you're interested in this, get yourself more than 160,000 wavetables for all types of modern synthesizers, particularly wavetable synthesizers, at www.wavetables.lol. So another thing I should probably mention before we get into pitch, slope, and enharmonic attacks is that these hybrid Bezier, or the Hybez waveforms, sound really great with the Vintage 8 or Vintage 12 mode on them. Let's see, is this have... You get very PPG-like things. With delightful 8-bit aliasing. With the little glassy timbre underneath it. Okay, let's move on to talking about pitch slope and enharmonic attacks. I'm going to grab this one I was just playing, this patch, and let's see. Let's turn off all of our like detune, fine-tuning type of modulations. Let's remove the random here. Let's make sure we're not using any unison. Let's turn that off. Okay. So now we don't have a lot of like fine tune. Actually, we had none. No fine tune modulation. Let's take it out of 8-bit mode, shall we? Now, over here in common pitch in the Korg R&D synths, so this applies to wavestate, it applies to modwave, and also to multipoly. They have this pitch slope parameter, which you may not have ever noticed before. So what is pitch slope? So pitch slope is a way of tracking pitch to the keyboard. When pitch slope is 1, we get, maybe we should get our keyboard up, right, so you can see that. Our standard full keyboard tracking. But if we wanted to make these oscillators not track the pitch of the keyboard, we could change this down to 0. And when we get to 0, every single dingle note on the keyboard, no matter how high or low, plays the same pitch. And it's going, and you're hearing the filter cutoff, which is being modulated by key track, but you note that the pitch is the same for every note, okay? So that's one way that we can completely disconnect the keyboard from the pitch that's being played in the oscillator. And then we could, change that oscillator pitch with our pitch controls that go with the oscillator. And this is, but it's going to play the same pitch like everywhere we go. Now, another interesting thing we could do with this, if we change it all the way up to 2, the range here I think is -2 to +2. At +2, every half step is now a whole step. And this is sort of interesting because you could play like familiar chord shapes and you'll get completely different chords. So this is a very avant-garde effect, but if you're like a weirdo composer, you might try this. I mean, it sounds very 70s soundtracky to me, if you ask me. So that's something you could do. You could also invert the keyboard by setting this to -1. So now high notes are low and low notes are high. So that's a weird effect, right? Another thing that we could do just with pitch slope itself, besides inverting the keyboard, turning the keyboard into crazy intervals, or disconnecting the keyboard from oscillator pitch, is we could set it to a very small value away from 1. So let's take like this layer and let's set its common pitch slope to 1.01, which is as small as we can make it. Now if I play on the keyboard, you might not even hear what's happening. But let's duplicate this layer, copy the layer, we'll paste it to layer B, all right? And then in layer B, we'll go in and let's set the slope back to 1. Come on, double click and just do it. There we go. Now, if we play this patch and we hear these 2 layers, we'll hear what's going on. So on middle C, there's no difference in the pitch of these 2 layers. Maybe we go to play mode so we can see everybody. But as I go up or down, there's increasing detuning as we get above or below middle C. That's kind of a weird effect. That might be especially useful if we are also modulating a pan position with note number. Like if we make that really big, what'll happen is like notes high on the keyboard will be way off to the right and be detuned. Let's go up here a little bit. And then similarly, notes very low will be panned off to the left and have more detuning. That's a little too low. Whoa, getting a little crunch there. And then when we're near the center of the keyboard, that's a very interesting type of detuning, right? And in a track, you might not even notice like what's going on, but it's a very interesting sound. So it's a fun thing to try. Now, that brings us to the fact that there's another way. Let's say that we don't have a slope parameter. Now, the slope is not always called slope. This could be like, oscillator key track or tune key track or something like that, or pitch track. Now we've got that detuning off. Let's say that you don't have a parameter like that. There's another way that you could, say, disconnect the keyboard from the pitch of the oscillators. And that would be to take your tune parameter. In this case, it really is tune, because we have tune transpose an octave in the Korg R&D synths. And tune goes a very long way. So we could select tune and we could modulate it with note number. So controller, note number. Now I'm not modulating tune with note number yet, but as I pull this down, I'm going to play a couple notes. As I get to 60, 60 is the magic number, minus 60 to be precise. As I get to minus 60, now the note number modulation is offsetting the pitch slope modulation, and every note on the keyboard plays the same tone, which is that middle C. So that's another way of disconnecting the keyboard from the oscillator. We could also do different values here, right, to get the impression of different pitch slopes. That's minus 30. Oops, come on, do it. There we go. Now, this kind of tuning change, right, makes this oscillator enharmonic or inharmonic. You could say it either way with respect to, say, layer B, where we're not doing that. And if this, let's see, let's go to layer A. If this tuning is just off of minus 60, let's say like minus 55, now we've got a situation where layer A changes very slowly over the course of the keyboard. I just played across 4 octaves. There's very little change from key to key. We can now do this enharmonic attack trick that I was talking about. Like, let's put a sample in here. Let's change this to be a sample, and let's see. What's the one I want? I want something that's sort of effecty. Let's see. Oh yeah, attack. There's a whole bunch of attack samples, right? Let's try maybe the granular noise one. Oops, let's turn. Okay, I want to turn oscillator 2 off, don't I? I was like, why am I hearing a tone there? Dum-dum, it's because you've got a tone in oscillator 2. Let's turn layer B off. And so now I've got this very subtle attack that's mostly noise. There, let's do it like that. Maybe I want this decay to go a little faster, so it's just a little like ticky thing. But it changes subtly up the keyboard, right? And then let's turn layer B back on. So that'll be like our body of this sound, and it's already got a slow attack. So that's kind of good. And now there's an attack on that. Now that's not a very convincing like instrument emulation, right? But I just wanted to illustrate the concept. And so this idea of having an enharmonic attack, it's something I've used in multiple different synthesizers, but it really works great in wavestate. So we'll show that in a second. And also, you heard this same kind of effect in the introduction patch, which was in Pigment 6, using its new modal physical modeling oscillator. I suppose if we changed, let's see, I suppose if we change layer B here to be using a sample, this might also, whoops, we didn't select sample. If we change this to a sample, it might also be more effective. This tends to work pretty well with, like, you know, like real instrument recordings. Let's see, what do we have here that might be interesting? How's that? I mean, that's kind of a weird percussive thing using the wind chimes. But that's not exactly what I'm looking for. Let's see. What else? That's kind of interesting. Like this noise into the meditation tree. I mean, it's almost like we're hitting it with something, right? Meditation tree itself also makes a good enharmonic attack. We'll see that. Let's go to some other patches that do this. Or maybe this is more successful. You start to get the idea, though. There's a lot of kind of fun stuff you could do. Yeah, so here's kind of a weird, another fantasy instrument here. So we've got like this kind of breathy attack that turns into a chime. Or maybe it's a flute. We don't know. So that's pretty interesting, right? Very reminiscent of, you know, Rompler kind of sounds. Here's a more complicated idea. I mean, that sounds kind of romperish. If we turn off layer A, which is the body of our sound, we can just hear the attack. Now, instead of using a note number to pitch, I'm actually just using slope here because we do have slope in this instrument. So here's the bell tree actually, and it's modulating in pitch very slightly up and down the keyboard. And then we turn on the body of our sound. Let's play that here. Here I'm using one of the KRC Mathwaves 64 frame wavetables to make this really weird attack. This also has an attack. Choo, choo, choo. And we're getting that effect because we're modulating over these very closely spaced but very different waveforms in this wavetable. You see the OS1 envelope is just moving this a little bit, but there's 64 waveforms in here. And then we put our attack back in. It's interesting, right? How you hear that enharmonic part, the layer B part, it doesn't sound out of tune. It just sounds like the attack of this sound, even though we don't really know, like, is this a voice? What is this? Pretty cool, right? Let's see. Before I jump into wavestate, let's just cover another idea here. So we can use this same kind of pitch slope modulation idea to do an automatic glide effect. So in this case, I've just got this is a one oscillator patch, one layer, but listen to this. What's going on here? Well, at middle C, we don't hear any like pitch swoop, but as we play up or down the keyboard, the note actually glides from middle C into the destination note. And as we're low on the keyboard, let's get our keyboard back up. Now we're going, from higher to a lower pitch. But then we're high on the keyboard, we're going from low to a higher pitch. It's kind of a weird effect, and it's sort of reminiscent of polyphonic portamento, except that every note is gliding, and they're all gliding from the same place to their proper positions. It's a very interesting sound. And I think if it's longer, if we make this pitch sweep longer, let's show how we did it first, I guess, right, Keith? Okay, so the way we're doing this is, so the tune parameter is being modified by note number, okay? And we're using -60. This is going to pull every single note, every single key on the keyboard to the same pitch, right? But then I can undo that by having a counteracting modulation. So we'll set up note number, controllers, note number, and then we'll go +60. And then, oops, sorry, we're doing this wrong. So we can counteract this negative modulation by modulating up by 60 with some other modulator. So let's pick oscillator 2 envelope, I think is what I want here. Yeah. So let's use oscillator 2 envelope. That's a generator. Oscillator 2 envelope. We'll do +60. All right. And now what's going to happen here? What's going on? Well, it counteracts it, but something really weird happens. It turns out we have to scale this amount by note number. So we'll take generator, note number, controller, note number, and that'll be our scaling parameter. And now what's going to happen? So now we've got that effect back, right? Where we're gliding from C up to whatever our final pitch is supposed to be. Now, if we make that attack ramp like very long, here's a variation on this patch. It's like the THX sound, right? Is that how they did the THX sound? I don't know. It's very similar. It's a very similar effect. So that's kind of a cool patch you can do with these techniques. All right. Yeah, that's kind of fun. Anyway, there you go. So there is an introduction to pitch slope modulation and enharmonic attacks. In the last bit of this video, we're going to kind of look at the original inspiration for this and an even different way that you can use this in wavestate. And it's even more successful in wavestate. Because wavestate has a lot of great, it's got the wave sequencing feature, right? And all the great samples that you have here in modwave. But it's much better at like kind of splicing them together. And so we'll see that in just a sec. But I'm going to take a little break because I'm tired of talking, okay? Well, all right. I've jumped into wavestate. This is wavestate native. Where we are hearing one of these enharmonic attack patches that kind of inspired me to show you how to do this in other synthesizers. So what we're doing here is this is all being done in the wave sequence. We've got a very simple wave sequence where we have a small attack. You can see the time is very short here, and then it goes to a sustaining timing lane, and then we've got two samples. So we've got our attack sample, which in this case is a tambourine, and then a soft marimba as the body. And what's going on here, again, there's this very short transition between step 1 and step 2. And then in the pitch lane, we're modulating tune in this way that I was talking about over in modwave. So we're using note number to modulate the tuning like down to a number that's close to 60. In this case, it's 48. So this initial attack sample is, it's not totally flat, but it's, let's move our time up here. It's kind of moving with the keyboard. All right. So we're just using that very initial part of it. Let's change this back to what it was. I can't remember what was on, 0.04 something. Yeah. But it's nice that it varies just a little bit. We're like replacing the attack on that marimba with the granular tambourine sample. You can then do all sorts of other effects, like this is called a glass scraper. And for our attack, we're actually using the finger cymbal sample, and then we're using one of the Prophet VS waves for our body. It's pretty interesting that we don't hear the out-of-tuneness of this sample, as a conflicting pitch. We just hear it as this complex attack. And so, here's that modulation. So here we're almost down to 60. We're at minus 55.93. So the finger cymbal barely changes across the keyboard, while of course our VS body sample is not having its tuning modulated in that way. Let's see, there's a couple of other, here's glass mallets. So this is using that meditation tree sample as the attack. And again, its tuning is being modulated almost to 60. And then another Prophet VS wave as the body. Then you also see that in the sample lane itself, we're transposing it up, we're pitching it down using tune. So we're kind of dialing in whatever desired kind of tone we want. I can see I can change it quite a bit. See, I don't think that one makes as much sense. It should be pitched up a little bit. And then, when you have a whole bunch of these, actually, let's listen to this one real quick. So here we're using sleigh bells as our attack. And you can hear how they, as we go low, we can hear that that sample's being pitched down, but again, it's not following the keyboard precisely. And so that gives us a lot more, kind of range, right? Because we're avoiding that sleigh bell sample like chipmunking or even running out of room as we pitch it up. Let's see, how much is that being modulated? Minus 55.93. So again, almost minus 60. So it's almost the same pitch across the keyboard, but not quite. And then, of course, since this is wavestate, we could put these into each of those different patches. We could put it into a separate layer, right? And then we could put our joystick into crossfade mode. And now we've got a patch where we can do all sorts of hybrid instruments that sort of morph. As we move the vector joystick. Pretty cool stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I guess one final thing to look at. Let's go grab, what is it? Pigments again. Let's go grab Pigments and let's show how I used that in our opening patch. And I'm just going to look at OBS real quick to make sure my picture's still there. Yeah, it sure is. All right. So again, this patch is using the new modal engine. And these great organic sounds just like come out of this thing. So this is kind of a guitar sound that kind of reminds me of a Cocteau Twins kind of sound. It's just the same modal engine, kind of a plucked string sound that then has some different effects on it. We've got a shimmer reverb, we've got tape echo. I guess I've got an optional phaser here. And having built this, I was like, "Oh, let's do the let's do the Enharmonic attack trick on it." So here's a version where in, let's see, synth mode, engine 2 is just the original guitar kind of sound. All right. But then I've modified that same sound in engine 1 to be more of this chime. So you see my decay is much lower. I've changed the warp a little bit. We're using a different shaper. And decay is way down. And then you can hear as I play, let's see, am I showing the keyboard? Yeah. You can hear that this is not following the standard tuning. But how do we do that in Pigments? Well, we've got a tune parameter for each engine. And so if I click into the coarse tune parameter, you can see that I'm modulating it down by, it's kind of funny, minus 0.420. But this is a very similar thing. So keyboard, in this case, is the same thing as note number over in the Korg R&D synths. And let's just try to find the point at which there's no difference between each key. So what I can do is I could just play two notes like this, and I could adjust this down until I hear them being the same. And you'll find that it's 0.5. Minus 0.5 makes every key on the keyboard play the same tone. Let's increase decay a little bit so you can tell that a little bit more, I guess. See, no matter what key I hit, it's the same pitch. And so then we just back that off a little bit, and we're going to get that Enharmonic attack effect, right? And then we'll turn engine 2 back on and enjoy our chimey guitar. Super interesting, right? I think that wraps it up. So, let's see. Hey, if you made it this far, like and subscribe for more talky synthesizer content. Go to www.wavetables.lol. Get KRC Mathwaves. You can get those hybrid Bezier Wavetables, plus more than 160,000 more for all sorts of modern synthesizers, including Pigments, Serum, Vital, the Korg Modwave, Korg Multipoly, Eurorack versions for 16-bit wave edit style hardware, phase plant, and then plus a collection of samples called Varieties of Noise, and a bunch of other stuff that's increasing, getting bigger and bigger all the time. In my next video, I want to talk a little bit more about other AI stuff, so like and subscribe so you don't miss that. I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about how I originally figured out how to build this giant collection of wavetables, and a lot of people have asked about that. So have a great day. It's cocktail hour, so it's time to wrap this up. Go check out the links in the description. All of the people I talked about earlier in the video, there'll be links there. Have fun, resist if that's your thing. Punch a Nazi, like always punch Nazis. And this is your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol saying ta-ta for now.